Welcome to Technically Speaking, conversations for design managers delivering real stories and ready-to-use tactics to help you build confidence and credibility. I sit down with top voices in design, tech, and business to open the black box of leadership. I'm your host, Harrison Wheeler. With 20 years in design and a decade leading teams from scrappy startups to global giants, it's time to get technical. Hey everybody, thanks for tapping in and listening. In this limited podcast series, we'll explore the untold stories of AI product development, the go-to-market strategies that actually worked, the personal projects that evolved into powerful tools, and the unique challenges of designing for AI-driven experiences. Let's get into building for the future. Today, we're getting technical with Ovetta Sampson, AI and design expert. She joins us from Chicago. She's the founder and owner of Right AI, which helps small to mid-sized businesses manage the regulatory, social, cultural, economic, and technical risks. She's formerly led teams at companies like Google, Capital One, and IDEO, and we'll discuss the triumphs and unexpected turns in building in the AI space. Ovetta, welcome to the show.
Hi, Harrison. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to be here.
Look, I've been excited to have you on the show for some time. I think we were able to be in person.
Right. I'm sorry it took so long.
All good. All good. Yeah, I can remember meeting you in person for the first time at Config about 2 years ago. Time flies because it doesn't feel like it's been that long. But here we are coming up even on another conference season again. One of the reasons I'm excited to have you on the show is, number one, we've been talking a lot about AI, and specifically for you, you started your own company. Previously you're at Google, now you're doing your own thing. Maybe kind of speak to what was the motivation behind that?
Yeah, it was funny when I left Google. It was maybe about maybe not even 2 weeks that I had my website up and
Yeah.
my shingle out digitally, and I was talking to clients.
Yeah.
But I had been thinking about this for a very long time, even when I was back at Capital One.
Mhm.
And I was watching the zeitgeist on AI at that time and the implementation. And it was like a bullet train. And
Mm.
people with me were asking all the wrong questions. Like they were asking questions about artificial general intelligence and when AI was going to take over for doctors and when AI was going to replace teachers and all this kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
was like, do these people know how these things work and how unreliable they are? Like in my brain, I was thinking about why isn't anyone asking the questions about the risks of
Mm.
implementing AI in places where AI does not belong? And flash forward to August 2022, I got hired by Google, and they were like, "Oh, don't worry. Google's a big place. You'll have a lot of time to like get to know people before you really start, having to really, have influence and change and all this kind of stuff." And
Yeah.
then ChatGPT came out like
Right.
2 months later, and it was been 80, 90, 100 miles an hour since then.
Right.
And so I really was like, I wish that I had a venue and an avenue
Mm.
to help companies take the needed slow down timeout that they need to take to really be mindful about the way that they implement AI.
Yeah.
And my mom used to say when I was a little girl, she would say, there's a right way, the wrong way, and your way to do things. And I wanted AI to be done the right way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I did right AI.
Oh, I love that. I love how that story is built into the name. I was just talking with a friend the other day. And I don't know if you can remember Silicon Valley, 2013, 2014. There's a lot of VC money coming in. I think back then
Mhm.
people were spending their money on, slides, pool tables, kegs. Um, it almost feels like it's coming back, right? There's a lot of
Yes.
new startup companies that are having billions of dollars thrown at them. I think for Figma, I think there's a couple of boat parties that are even happening with everything going on in this world of moving fast and breaking things. Like, what are ways that people should be thinking about AI responsibly, right? Because it feels like we're in a hype machine. Everything you see on a post, everyone's look is basically saying, "Look at what I did with AI."
Yeah, I listened to a podcast. It's called the Philosopher's Podcast,
Yeah.
and it's all about philosophy. So, I forget the guys whose name now just escapes me, but I love this podcast. And the podcast that I was listening to on my morning walk yesterday was about the the dark ages, right?
Mm,
And so the reason why I love this podcast is because he doesn't just talk about Kant or Voltaire or Machiavelli in a vacuum. He talks about the economies and histories and things that are going on around it.
mm,
And one of the things that we talked about is we all know about Luther, taping the reforms to the church door, right?
yeah.
And opening up a new age of Renaissance.
Right.
But what preceded that, right before that, was something that destroyed 30 to 40% or 60% of the population in Europe.
Mm,
Right. So you come from the establishment of the church, right? The first pope and all this kind of stuff, 5th,
right.
6th, 10th BC. And uh and you get into the middle, the dark ages, right? And the Middle Ages, where there's a population growth and there's still economic growth, but there's this kind of like closing the ranks around religion. And
Mm,
then right after that, the word is wiped out. So you're
right.
like, what's the faith in God thing? Like, my mortality
Yeah.
is a little close. And then you get the Renaissance, right? And this
Right.
this
And this is
this
after like the
flourish.
plague, right?
Right.
Yep.
I'm sorry, this is the Black Death, the plague,
No.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Right after the plague. Um, and so he was talking about that, and I said, that sounds eerily familiar. And in
Mm,
fact, I'm gonna write a column for um, ACM Interactions magazine that talks about the allusion to this to explain where we are,
yeah.
because it's in 2008 we had a complete collapse of our economy
Right.
during the housing bubble, right?
Yeah.
And then right after that, we had a complete collapse of the internet infrastructure and money.
Right.
People funding new things, pet.com. Anybody remember that? Like all of these .com bubbles started popping up around,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People started retreating, right? When the economy retreats. And then all of a sudden we have this pandemic, right?
Yep.
That really just kind of like transforms the way that we think about work, about
Mm,
economies, about making money, about everything. Well, it's kind of like when you lock up a a a, a lavacious uh dude all winter, and then
yep.
summer comes. What
Yeah.
happens? They go nuts, right? They start, drinking, partying, all this kind of stuff, and that's where we are. And it just happens to coincide with
Yeah.
right after we had a population crisis, we had an
Yeah.
economic crisis, and now people are like, I got money burning a hole in my pocket. It got to go somewhere. And then all of a sudden, you get some little upstart called OpenAI saying, hey, we got a whole new revelation in technology out here.
Right.
And
Right.
so the charlatans come out. And
Mm,
just like Gutenberg was when he came out with the press, Gutenberg
yeah.
was a charlatan, by the way. He literally sold snake oil, right?
Yeah.
And stumbled upon the printing press. We have a
Mm,
lot of Gutenbergs out here trying to leverage this technology for their own gain.
yeah.
So so that's what we are in the midst of an economic windfall,
Yeah.
instability in government, right? So we have like,
Mm,
a a wild card in the White House. Money likes to flow, yo. It
yeah.
has to flow, and it likes to flow on solid ground. Money
Yeah.
don't like to be up and down and
Mm.
unstable. And so the most stable thing out there is someplace called Google,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, so that's where we are. Most people are going to be like, why did she just answer the question? But I'm a nerd and I'm a
Yeah.
historian. And I believe that nothing is done without context. And the
Yeah.
context is we have emerged from a very frightening time as a world economy, and coincided that is a discoverable newly discovered by the public technology,
Right.
and 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 money has been burning a hole in a lot of people's pockets, and they
Yeah.
need it to go somewhere. So what's going to happen is there are going to be hundreds of AI startups funded. And then it's going to turn into what I call, and what really happened with MoviePass, right? Where
Mm.
MoviePass was a great idea, and then VCs got a hold of it
Yeah.
and turned it to, oh no, it's the data. It's the data that's going to make the business model. Because
Right.
what's going to happen is these companies will not have business models because
Right.
AI is not a business model.
Yeah. Yeah. For folks listening, MoviePass, if they don't know the context of MoviePass essentially created a subscription where you could go to, was it an unlimited amount of movies for like
It
nine
was
ninety nine a month?
they had it for $9.99 a month, almost $10. You
Yeah,
can go to any movie that you wanted, which,
exactly.
by the way, on its surface is not a good business model.
Right. Well, it
Now,
turns out
movies
they,
cost
but it
$50.
turns out they didn't have a business model until they were going bankrupt.
Right. And so, and no offense to the brothers, like
Sure.
the 2
Sure.
black dudes who started
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
it was it was it was their thought that
Yeah.
if we get more people to the movies
Right.
and more people paying subscriptions, we could even it out. And it
Yeah.
wasn't a bad thought, right? Because
Right.
people love MoviePass.
Right.
Why wouldn't you love MoviePass?
Right.
$10 and you can go to as many movies as you want. So what they did do, they increased the amount of people going to movies. Well, but when
Exactly.
you increase the amount of people coming to movies, that means you increase the cost of that, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
when they refuse to raise the cost of their
Mm.
subscription, Netflix
Yeah.
didn't follow into this.
Right.
I
Right.
damn near pay $30 a month for Netflix now, right?
Yeah.
It started off at
Yeah.
7.99. Remember that?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
when they refused to raise the price, and they thought they were going to get money from other things like advertising, all this other
Right.
like
Right.
smoke and
Right.
mirrors stuff,
Right.
it collapsed. But it collapsed not because of the founders. It collapsed because of the hype men,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The founders were replaced by these white people on the board who
Yeah.
felt like 2 brothers couldn't do it, and they were replaced by some white dude who went to school with their
Mhm.
kid,
Mhm. Well,
who
you
had
you
no track record of success.
well, if you think about that story, though, it's no different than the WeWork approach or the Uber,
Yo,
right?
right,
Um,
right.
those were highly, highly funded, companies
Theranos, right?
that essentially that just essentially lowered the cost for the user where it appeared as if it was a low price thing and a better deal than cabs. But in actuality, if you hop into an Uber today, right, you almost kind of question why you took it because it's so expensive and maybe the times aren't as quick as they used to be. But one of the things I wanted to kind of dive into, I have two questions for you based off of kind of like the last discussion that we had. uh you've been, like I mentioned before, you've been working in this space for quite some time. You're saying some of this stuff isn't new. So maybe give like in terms of like what you're seeing, obviously there's a lot more consumer sort of use cases. But I think in terms of like real applied sort of science, and it's like
Yeah.
maybe give listeners and folks viewing it a little bit of background of what you've seen over the years.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I am not a Luddite, right? I am not some person who sits on the sidelines and is like, "Why do we need TV?" You know, "We have radio." That's not me, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got into this because I am a lover of technology, and not only am I a lover of technology, the
Yeah.
reason I love it is because it has the ability to even the playing field.
Mm.
All right. So you could be a young, poor, uh, um, almost like unprofessionally educated, but engineering minded, like mechanical engineering minded, young boy in Detroit,
Mm.
and put you together with Commodore 64, and you are creating robots, right?
Right.
Like that 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 help you to test the soil and water in your community, right? Like, um, you are a young teen in Kenya who has experienced violence every time there's a political election there, and you create a model predicting a predictive model that allows you to pinpoint when those riots first start,
Mm.
so that you can send an alert to your communities to help stop that violence,
Yeah.
right? These are examples of technology being used in what I term
Mm.
the good of society, right? And so
Yeah.
when I got into artificial intelligence way back 10 years ago, my goal was human-centered AI design.
Yeah.
How do we take some of the most complex problems, climate change, racial health disparities, um, obesity, diabetes, breast cancer, transportation, deserts, food deserts, all these things? And how
Yeah.
do you apply technology, lack of vaccinations, last mile delivery problems? How do you apply technology to help with that, right?
Mm.
That's why I got into it. But
Yeah.
now I sit and I see every day somebody talking about I use ChatGPT to write my resume.
Yeah.
Do you understand the energy it takes for a large language model
Yeah.
to give you that schlock of a resume?
Mm.
That's what makes me upset, that
Yeah.
we are having the best minds in the world, in London, in Chicago and Tokyo and Beijing and all this kind of stuff, trying to make a faster, better AI widget, when we
Mm.
really should have um um folks trying to use this technology not to start wars or to keep wars or to support propaganda, but to call out inaccuracies and falsehoods and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not the technology, it's who wields it. And a
Yeah.
long time ago, I wrote The Human Problem in AI. And until we fix who we are as a
Mhm.
society, as a humanity, our AI will still have these wayward, weird outcomes that
Yeah.
are not beneficial to the world.
Yeah.
And I'm just tired of the tech bros. I'm
Yeah.
tired of bros. I'm tired of seeing that photo of all these CEOs of tech companies standing there grinning with that dude in the office
Yeah.
about the progress of AI, when
Right.
I know that they have created these systems illegally
Yeah.
off the backs and the labor and even I would go as far to say slave labor
Yeah.
of human beings, from
Yeah.
creators, content creators to content laborers and moderation. All of that is human work. So I will never say that we have achieved artificial intelligence, because all of that AI stuff is
Mm.
done on human labor.
So, with that being said, so clearly, when we think about this consumerization of it, like there's obviously a how would I articulate this? There's a consumption factor to it that many people don't necessarily recognize, but
Right.
uh, clearly that energy is being produced for, I don't want to say waste, but perhaps maybe for things that don't necessarily deliver at a high degree of impact. Maybe they deliver
Right.
on
Like
convenience.
I think yes, I would say it's wasted. But let
Yeah.
me just say this. So I used to be a journalist,
Yeah.
an international journalist and humanitarian journalist. And one time I was in Kaduna State, which is in
Yeah.
northern Nigeria,
Yeah.
and I was on my way back to Lagos. and I went to the airport. We're driving to the airport, and the airport was on fire.
Mm.
So when we got into the airport, the people who were supposed to be flying our plane were like sitting in the lobby. So I'm
Mm.
like, we're probably not going anywhere today, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like talking to people, I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, they lifted the gas subsidies. So in developing countries, a lot of time what they do on necessities like bread, gas, water, or
Yeah.
not bread, fuel, commodities, things like that, is that the government will subsidize the price.
Mm.
We know that as healthcare, right? So
Right.
the government subsidizes the real price of that so that poor people can have these necessities.
Yeah.
But these subsidies can't go on forever, right?
Right.
And so the government actually needs taxes, like they need money to perform. And so Nigeria had said, you know what, we can't keep subsidizing fuel, so we're going to lift those subsidies. And people lost their minds
Mm.
because gas went from 99 cents a gallon to $10 a gallon.
Right.
Now, I don't know about your bank account, but that's really hard. And
Yeah.
anybody trying to buy eggs realizes that, right?
Yeah.
This is the same that's happening with the
Mm.
energy that consumption that it takes to run a large language model.
Yeah.
Companies like Google, OpenAI, Facebook are subsidizing those costs, right? They're
Right.
saying, hey, we are not going to pass those costs off to our consumers
Mm.
because we are trying to get this technology off the ground. We want them to adopt it, whatever. But
Right.
then you have Sam Aldrin come out there talking about don't say please and thank you to our models. Why is he saying that? Because every time you say please and thank you to a model that doesn't understand what please and thank you is, that model has to use energy
Right.
to support that and get to what you really want. So
Yeah.
now he's policing our speech instead of building a better, more efficient way to do large language models. You see how
Yeah.
that works?
What do you?
So
Yeah.
the subsidies
Yeah.
on the energy consumption, the cost of these models are
Yeah.
starting to be lifted. And
Right.
that's when consumers are going like, do I really need to pay $400 a month for
Right.
GPT to help me with my resume?
Yeah. But this actually feels like there's a cascading effect even tied to this, right? Because majority or a lot of these companies that are starting up are building their engines off of those models.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes,
So,
Lord. And
yeah.
so people are like, oh, I'm just going to implement API or AI. I'm
Yeah.
just going to sign up and do my API through ChatGPT, and I'm
Yeah.
going to do it through Google, through Gemini. And Lord, I'm waiting for the airport to burn, right?
Uh,
Because I know how much it costs. Like I
yeah.
have actual numbers.
Yeah.
I know. I can tell you right now what Google spends
Yeah.
on Gemini. And
Wow.
if I told you,
Yeah.
it would blow your mind. And
Wow.
I know that that's unsustainable.
Is
I
there?
don't care how rich you are as a company. It
Yeah.
is unsustainable, and they know it. Elon
Yeah.
Musk went and built his little data center,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Go to the video and have him explain what he had to do on the data center, because all of this is fueled by data, right? And
Mm.
data has to be stored. And
Yeah.
when you store data, it's like nuclear energy.
Mm.
Like when you build a nuclear reactor, you
Yeah.
gotta have water. Why?
Yeah.
Because that stuff overheats.
Or cooling. Correct.
You just
Yeah.
think about your little garage, your little house,
Right.
right? You
Right.
think about if you live in Arizona or LA or hot places, you think about what happens to your thermostat.
Where's
Right.
where's your water going too?
Right. Right. And so now you think we have a water crisis in Arizona. Wait
Yeah.
till we start having a water crisis in the Lake of the
Mm.
Ozarks
Yeah.
or near Lake Superior or in Canada.
Right.
Places where water is prevalent, right?
Right. Right.
Because these data centers, models live on data,
Yeah.
lives on water.
Yeah.
Why? Because data lives on energy. So all of this is affecting our climate.
Yeah.
It's affecting our resources.
Right.
But we don't know that. And it's the same thing with subsidized subsidized healthcare. When you
Right.
go to get a knee replacement and then you pay $3,000 and you complaining, but it's really $200,000. Like, that's not sustainable.
Yeah. Is there such a thing as sustainable and responsible use of AI?
Absolutely.
Where,
Absolutely.
where does that come
And
from?
and
Yeah.
I'll have Emily is coming out. She's the one who wrote Stochastic Parents with Timid,
Yeah.
and she was gonna debate. It was a no contest debate, really. And I think
Yeah.
you should see this on YouTube, and I'll send you the link. And
Yeah.
it was she's a linguist. She's a doctor of linguistics at the University of Washington, right? She is not an AI person,
Yeah.
but she's in natural language processing, which is what LLMs is all about, right?
Mhm.
And really, the energy is machines were never meant to communicate with people, and to get them to recognize patterns of speech, it requires a lot of energy
I see.
and a
Yeah.
lot of manpower.
Yeah.
So when you think about hot dog, not hot dog, the amount of energy and effort it takes
Mhm.
for a machine to know the difference between a hot dog and something that isn't a hot dog is ridiculously mind blowing.
Mm. Wow.
Okay. So now you got a machine that has been trained on the whole of the internet,
Right.
right? We don't know what it's trained on, but
Right.
you're really just asking it to give you specifics about vampirism. So now I've got to go through the Library of Congress, which
Yeah.
it has absorbed, and it's got
Yeah.
to use all that energy to hit Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right. Right.
When what you really could have did was just had a model on Bram Stoker's Dracula, and we just go to that and use that. You
Got
see
it.
the difference, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
companies don't want to do that because they don't own Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? So
Right.
they have to
So
have
it
something
requires paying.
right.
Yeah.
It doesn't require paying that. Like, it's like going to the library and then saying, "Why should I go to Barnes& and Noble?" Right?
Right.
So, the company's
Mm.
like, "Hey, we have to own part of this. So we're just gonna put all this in a black box." Right? We're not gonna tell anybody what data we use. We're not
Mm.
gonna tell them how it's trained. We're not gonna tell them how it's labeled. And then we're
Yeah.
gonna give them these amazing magical outputs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But when we could say, open up, this is how it's trained, this is the information it has, this is the specificity it does. And if you are looking for XYZ, come to this model. If you are
Right.
looking for ABC, come to this model. A lot more efficient.
Mm. Mm. So
A
so
distributed network of
yeah.
models
Right.
instead of this kitchen sink conglomerate that we're forced to go to. And then
Yeah.
it's gotta figure out what I want. So now I gotta do all this prompt engineering and fine
Yeah.
tuning
Yeah.
and twist turn.
Vivetta, if that, do you see that as an opportunity to disrupt? Is that a future that could happen, or?
Yes, I see an opportunity for a public large language model that
Mm.
is on a distributed network, a la not blockchain,
Yeah.
but distributed ledger, which is the same freaking thing. Fight
Yeah.
me on this one. Where the community itself
Yeah.
helps to um uh fuel it, uh 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 give it training, input, all of that, and can use it
Hmm.
on a per use basis, whatever. But it's done by the community for the community in an open manner, and people don't have to own it
Yeah.
because this falsehood and what I call emperor have no clothes business model of OpenAI is
Yeah.
ridiculous. This
Yeah.
idea that I can take all the knowledge in the world that was generated and created by somebody else and charge you to sift through it
Hmm.
to generate new content is really I really want that snake oil salesman stuff
Yeah.
because that's witch doctor stuff.
Right.
Now I'm supposed to pay you. You took my stuff that you said wasn't valuable. Facebook said all these books, the AI scan not valuable. Okay, not valuable. Then why aren't you paying me?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Wow.
what is the difference for
Hmm.
me going to a sharecropper in Mississippi? I just saw Sinners, so I'm going to a sharecropper in Mississippi, going go pick that cotton,
Yeah.
and then take that cotton to the mill, and then go behind the mill to the manufacturing place, and then go behind that to the store and go
Right.
buy your shirt.
Right. Right. When you could have just gotten it from the source.
When just go to the cotton and go make a shirt,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
Yeah.
no, no. I need to buy my shirt of the cotton I just picked because I'm providing you with the shirt making.
When it comes to building responsible experience with AI, are there any sort of principles that you have that,
Absolutely.
maybe kind of speak to those a little bit?
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. Um, I I used to call them the 10 commandments,
Okay.
but I switched that to the mindful AI.
Okay.
And I think of all the frameworks that you might want to have about
Yeah.
uh creating AI, one of the number one things that I say is that artificial intelligence is best used when it's applicable and desirable at the same time.
Mm.
So, a colleague of mine who I worked with at Google just posted on her LinkedIn. I'm calling it out, but she knows me, so she'll be fine. Where using video,
Yeah.
the home assistant from Google sent a message to whomever, I don't know, it was her or somebody,
Yeah.
that said, "Hey, your trash bins aren't out. They need to go out on Tuesday, so move your trash bin out."
Mm.
Now, that is an example of AI because what happens is AI probably used a video
Yeah.
and noticed that they would move the green trash bins every Tuesday or whatever. And
Right.
then this Tuesday they didn't. So
Right.
it's trying to be helpful. Like, hey, move the trash bins.
Yeah.
Now, is that a good use of AI? It's only a good use of AI is if I wanted it to do that.
Right.
Yeah. If it's kind of like, what's a bad email, right? Like, what's spam? Spam is only good if I actually need the offer.
Not
If
relevant.
I
Correct.
offer, it
Yeah.
ain't good, right?
Yeah.
And so we as designers have to help our tech bros figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Because we know people better. And so
Yeah.
to me, one of the number one things that you have to decide when you want to use AI to solve a problem is it applicable and desirable?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then once you decide that, then you have to decide what is the risk if it goes wrong.
Mm.
So those are the number two, and to me, the only two questions that need to be answered about applicable AI use.
Right.
And what's happening now, nobody's even asking those questions.
Right.
Like, we need to put AI in schools, and we need to put AI in cars, and we need to put AI in hospitals, and we need to put AI in ambulances, and we need to put AI in,
Yeah.
we put AI in everything,
Substitute
right?
for Uber for XYZ. It's the AI for now, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, does AI belong? Like, we're not even asking that question. And
Yeah.
I worked at IDEO, and a client came to us and was like, "Hey, we want to put technology in cabins." And I'm sitting there with the CMO going, "Do people want technology in that?"
I'm not sure if I want technology in my cabin.
Right. We did it. I mean, we shouldn't have. But like, we didn't ask it that question. And that question is paramount. It's like, it's not just can we do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's should it be done? And if so, what is the risk of doing
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, but I got to ask you this. So you were at Leading Design in New York as a conference where I think the community is mostly sort of like director plus folks.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yes.
were
Yes.
were there any sort of like themes and what was top of mind in terms of for design leaders?
Yeah, I think a lot of design leaders, quite frankly, are stuck in the past.
Mm.
And when I say stuck in the past, they're worrying about shit that don't matter no more.
Yeah.
And the things that they're worrying about, I understand why they're worrying about.
Yeah.
They're worried about what is engineering going to do with my wireframes? And I'm like, you're not going to have wireframes in about right? To, give it a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
Engineers you just gonna have full blown demo prototypes with code and everything.
Yeah.
Like, no offense, Figma, but
Yeah.
it's like their whole world is about to
Yeah.
really change.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I for one am glad I'm not there because I've been saying this for years, right?
Yeah.
Telling design leaders, you need to use AI. Don't be afraid of it. All this kind of stuff. I said
Mm.
that ever since I got to IDEO, right? Nobody
Yeah.
was listening. Now all of a sudden, people are online getting certificates, doing an AI boot camp. I'm like, what boot camp? What you teaching? You learn AI and UX, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's teaching them?
Yeah.
Something you learned on the internet? You
Yeah.
surely ain't teaching them something you did.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it is rarefied air for design and researcher leaders who have actually built AI products.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, very rare.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Next,
if you think about the
so
challenges that folks are going through right now, if
well,
they're
that
stuck
is
in the
one
past.
challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
just imagine you go to bed at night
Right.
and you speak French and everybody else speaks French, and you wake up in the morning and your clock is saying,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, what?
Right.
And you're like, what is it's Mandarin, right?
Right. Right.
That is a challenge. It's
Yeah.
not that there's a transition here or a
No.
curve or something
Reality.
that you
Yeah.
get to you get to ease into. The reality is these design teams have to shape up fast
Really
or their
fast.
engineering teams are gonna leave them in the dust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you're gonna be questioning why you don't got no head count next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are like, we don't need you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So other challenges are skill set gaps, right? Incorporating AI into your processes as a
Mm.
designer and researcher,
Yeah.
when to use it, when not to use it. What is foundational skills? How do you hire?
Right.
Do you hire because this person has a good portfolio on Figma? Or do you hire because this person has a degree in physics and understands ambiguity and systems thinking?
Mm. Yeah.
I hire for that, by the way.
Wow.
I don't hire for wireframes. Why? Because when you design an AI, when you engineer an AI, it takes that kind of multiple systems thinking scenario.
Mm.
If this person says object oriented um uh design, then I'm like, yep, I'm gonna hire that person.
Yeah.
Because the way that brain works is the way what I need for AI product design. All of that you have to reassess
Right.
about what is needed to be successful as a design leader in an automated age.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me. You got a book coming up. Is that some of the things that are going to be covered in it?
Yes. So I'm writing a series of articles for ACM magazine,
Right.
Associated Computing,
Okay.
and these will be excerpts from the book.
Okay.
And it's all about design in an automated age. What does it mean to be a designer? And a researcher, because I was a researcher and designer.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a design leader? What does it mean to have a design org?
Mm.
What is that going to look like? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I talk about this a lot in my presentations, but this is more like the blueprint or what I call a roadmap for
Yeah.
people who are like, what the WTF, yo.
Yeah. And that's
And
where we're at right now.
yes, and that's where we are. It's really for people who are like, I'm a good design leader.
Yeah.
At least I was yesterday. How do
Yeah.
I become a good design leader tomorrow? Right.
Yeah.
And here's the secret. There is going to be a ramp up time. It
Mm.
seems like overnight, but we all know that the Titanic didn't sink in a minute, right?
Right.
These companies are going to take a lot of time. Remember, we were all doing digital transformation. Remember that? We were
Yeah.
all gonna. It was gonna be this big digital, and people were like, "My data is still on prem." You were like, "Okay, it's gonna take a while." So that was a transition. We're still.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a transition. All I'm saying, that transition is not gonna be very long.
Mm.
And so I was at University of Illinois speaking to their graduate students
Yeah.
and undergrad students. And, the student came to me, he said, what I'm learning in my graphic design class, it ain't out there in the real world. And I said, first of all,
Yeah.
astute, you're right. What
Yeah.
they teach in college is not what they're doing out there.
Yeah.
So as design leaders, we have to find ways to bridge that skills gap with our team.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
cannot leave that to training and HR.
Right. Yeah. And by the time they come up with the training, it'll be outdated.
Right.
Yeah.
But there will still be perennial skill sets and needs. System thinking is one of them because the cool thing about AI design is the possibilities and scenarios of
Mm.
outcomes, right?
Yeah.
And most people are not used to that. Most people are linear. They're like, if I do this product, it's going to behave this way. What if you
Yes.
have a UI that has 5 different ways to behave,
Right.
depending
Right.
upon the engagement of the user?
Yeah.
But somebody has to design those ways.
Yeah. Personalization, right?
Yes. So in my talk, in the book, I talk about the shift from design for many to design for one.
Mm. When can we see the articles, and then when are you thinking the book's going to drop?
Well, I have my first article deadline next month. So
Okay.
the articles will be this fall. And the goal is to write the book for early next year.
Okay.
And it still will be relevant. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Well, we'll look forward to that. We'll wrap up on the show. How can folks kind of follow up on some of the things that you're doing
Yeah, they
and
can engage with me, of course, at LinkedIn. I'm always on there posting. It's becoming my little diatribe there. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to get some positive stuff on there. Of course, on my website, writeai now
Yeah.
.com. Um, I'm not doing a lot of talks or anything because I'm trying to focus on getting this book out
Yeah.
and writing my manifesto, really.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm going to be right, but I am saying, hey, here is 15 years of AI, and here what I think is going to happen for our industry.
Yeah.
And if you could take something from it, then I hope it will make you more secure, first of all,
Mm.
in your role as a design leader, and inspired
Yeah.
and not afraid of this technology. That's the only goal
Yeah.
that I have for the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I understand how important your time is and your commitments are, and really thank you
Yeah,
for
keeping me
coming on
from
the
my neck.
podcast. You say what? Yeah.
Pressing from my neck.
Hey. Oh, good. It's the weekend. It's the weekend. Ovetta, thank you so
Pearson, it
much.
was so great to talk to
Yeah.
you. I'm so proud of you, brother.
Oh,
And
thank you.
please call me anytime you need anything,
Yeah.
anything that I can help you with. I will try. And anything, any ideas or collaboration opportunities, I am all here for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in to Technically Speaking. If you liked today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe on Substack, YouTube, and you can give me a follow on LinkedIn. Links are in the show notes. See you next time.